What's up, everyone? I'm Julian, and this is the Inside Scoop podcast. As always, I hope you're doing well. We're recording this on Friday. Oh yeah, it's gonna be a good weekend. It is my birthday weekend. I just had to mention that. Not that many people really care. I'm turning 24 though. I'm officially gonna be in my mid 20s. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Um, so it's gonna be a fun weekend. We've got lots to talk about in this episode. We've had multiple collaborations with our previous two episodes. One, of course, with Cody from Smash Hit Sports, and then Damon Donalds from Holy Cross Football, a one-on-one conversation. We had a few great talks earlier. Now it's riding solo here from the studio, aka my apartment. Um, we're going to discuss the week 4 recap. There were a lot of fun games, and then also going over the top 25 for week 5. And then we've got some juicy matchups coming up. Not necessarily just this weekend. We'll get to those ones in October, a little bit later, of course. But week 5, we've got some good games. Really excited to talk to you guys about it. But something I've been trying to do first with a little warm up has been talking about my fantasy football success um, in the NFL. So I love playing NFL fantasy football. I've been doing it since I was in maybe 6th or 7th grade. Um, I'm in 3 leagues this year, and right now I am 3-0 in one league, and then 1-2 in the other two. So one of my leagues, I'm off to a great start, and I want to keep chugging away. And then the other two, you know what? It could be worse, but I've got some work to do. With my one friends league, who I'm 3-0 in, I kind of lucked out that the other person, they didn't really set their lineup, or reset it, I should say. They had a couple players that were out this week. Well, this week 3, it's Friday, so it's weird saying this past weekend, even though we already started week 4 of the NFL. But the previous weekend, I kind of lucked out. Like I had Saquon Barkley, who had another huge game for Philadelphia. Alvin Kamara's doing his thing. DK Metcalf and Justin Jefferson both had solid performances. Even though Justin Jefferson didn't do much in the second half against Houston for the Vikings. But hey, the Vikings are 3-0. I'm not going to complain. They look really good. A tough game at Green Bay this weekend, which Green Bay is also a very solid team. Right now, I'd say it's the two best teams in the NFC North. So that'll be a fun one. Of course, I'm going to be rooting for the Vikings, and you can count on me watching that game Sunday at noon. But regardless, this team has been, for my fantasy team, has been really good. I had Travis Kelce, who had his best performance yet. Only had 7 points, though. He had 4 catches for 30 yards. He has been depressing, but every tight end has been depressing. Like, no tight end, I would say, has been really popping off. The ones who have only really been great, maybe the most consistent has been Brock Bowers, which is good, I think, for his future. Dallas Goedert might be the best tight end right now, mainly because he had one huge game because A.J. Brown is hurt and then Devonta Smith got hurt. So it's like, well, who else is Jalen Hurts going to throw to, right? But the tight end position, that's been tough for everyone. So it was a nice win that I had. I'm a 3-0 in. My one buddies league, I was 0-2 heading into this week. I picked up my first win in that league as well. The injury bug really hurt. And I think it's funny that this is like the most unhealthy my team has been to begin the season, and I picked up a win. Josh Allen, thank you. He had another 30-point performance in week 3. Thank you so much. Dalton Kincaid finally was relevant. He had like 40 yards and a touchdown. Who else did I have was good? Chris Olave had his best game of the season as well. Yeah, it was a good week. Plus, I did luck out. The guy I played had a really tough week. I think he only had like 77 points or something. Last week, I feel like was a really rough week overall in fantasy. There were really only a hand select number of guys that really had good weeks. Everyone else either just kind of was a bust or was mid tier. So I only had maybe 100 points that weekend. So I wouldn't even say my team did that great. I just lucked out that a few of my players popped off, and then it was enough to get me a win. In my buddies league, it was a close battle. I had Malik Neighbors, who has looked really good this year, and then Derrick Henry, who both they combined for like 60 points. And then I had a handful of guys who were pretty mid, but I had some duds. But my one buddy, the commissioner of the league, I played him. Shout out to you, Jackson. And he had Austin Eckler going on Monday night, and I was up 10 points, and Eckler surpassed 10 points. I think he finished with like 15 points. So I took a tough loss there. And part of me feels like I deserved it just because, yeah, I had, it was a close game, but really only a few of my players actually did well. Brees Hall, Derrick Henry was great, but like Zay Flowers had a tough game. I had Rashid Shaheed, and I've seen memes on him where he had two really big weeks, and then the Saints just sucked offensively week 3. So he put up a fat 0, which was really disappointing. Anyway, I had Malik Neighbors and going on Thursday Night Football last night, and of course, on a 4th down play, he suffers a concussion. Malik Neighbors did not find himself in the end zone, but he had 12 catches for 115 yards. I mean, PPR, he had me 23 points. Like, he had a phenomenal week. So I was really happy with that performance. It's too bad that he has a concussion. I will say for the fantasy, not like this is the only thing that matters, but for the fantasy value part of it, at least he has those extra few days, just because then they won't play till like the following Sunday. Like, what would that be? October 6th, I want to say it would be. So hopefully that's enough time for him to recover. But obviously that's a very serious injury. So I would totally understand if he sits out a week because, you don't want to jeopardize his career. Anyway, so I was very happy about his performance. So far, he's been really great for me. He's been my clear wide receiver 1 for one of my leagues. So anyway, wow, 7 minutes already for my introduction. Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. It's going to be a long one. Hope you guys have your popcorn and your snacks, and or if you're just working or doing something and like to listen to my voice. Week 4 recap. I'm going to try to keep it short just because we're so close to week 5 already. Let's talk, of course, starting with Minnesota football. Lindenwood hosts the St. Thomas Tommies for the first time ever in St. Louis, Missouri. It was a tough battle for St. Thomas. St. Thomas falls down 64-0 in a tough road battle. I mean, it was one of those games, right? There's really little positive to look at it, right? Offense couldn't get anything going. Defensively, you couldn't shut them down, right? I don't want to be quoted on this. I want to say Lindenwood is a scholarship program, despite their 0-3 record heading into week 4. Again, I mean, I think it's just there's differences, right, with non-scholarship players versus scholarship players, right? If you're a scholarship team, you're going to be able to get better recruits. That's just how it's going to be. And playing on the road for the first time in an environment that you've never played at before is not going to be easy. So Lindenwood definitely had their advantages. But yes, tough battle for St. Thomas. They head into week 5 with a bye. Much needed for the Tommies as they are 1-3 heading into conference play. Iowa over Minnesota. So this was a pretty cool game, a nice little battle in the Big Ten. The Gophers with their 4th straight home game. The Hawkeyes are in town. That's a pretty big one. And Iowa, I mean, they are a tremendous defensive team, but hey, their offense, I think, has really improved from last year. And this was a game, right, that I felt like was going to be a defensive battle. I remember I discussed in my previous week 4 preview with Cody from Smash Hit Sports that I think the over under for team total touchdowns was 1.5 for both teams. So for Iowa to win 31-14, I mean, we got to see some offense, right? Unfortunately, Iowa shut down the Gophers very well in the second half, and they couldn't get anything going. I mean, I think Iowa, their run game has been really good. Caleb Johnson, I want to say, is the running back for the Hawkeyes. I mean, he's off to a phenomenal start. And McNamara, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's by no means a top Big Ten quarterback, but I'd say he's in the mid tier for sure. Minnesota, I mean, they really couldn't get Darius Taylor going. Um, the receiving game wasn't really getting too much action, and then defensively, right? I mean, the Gophers really couldn't hold onto against Iowa's offense, which unfortunately is just not a great sign, right? I think this is one of those games like, okay, the Gophers had two big shutout wins against fairly easy opponents. You kind of have some hope against Iowa, but then I think reality kind of starts to set in that okay, Iowa was the top 25 team at one point, and for Minnesota, unfortunately, this was a program that I wasn't sure if they were going to be a bottom three Big Ten team this year. And for them to lose by 17 at home, it's a tough game. But again, I think reality sets in. Okay, they're 2-2. This is, did you really expect them to be 3-1 or 4-0 at this point? And it hurts because Iowa is a team that you can beat just because of the way they play. And then you had that 2-point loss to UNC. I mean, I could see where if you're a big Gopher fan, it's easy to say, oh, we could be 4-0, but to have them at 2-2, I think it's pretty realistic at this point. Clemson, a huge win over NC State. Clemson has really looked good offensively. More so, NC State has looked really bad defensively. Even in their wins this year against weaker opponents, they have let up a lot of points. So NC State, unfortunately, has been really disappointing, I would say, in the ACC. Michigan, they host USC. We discussed how I feel like this was a must-win for Michigan, right? You already have that home loss to Texas. And although Texas is number one in the country, that's not doing you any good. And if you want to have a chance at making the college football playoffs still, you would have to win this game. Because if you couldn't beat USC at home, it basically shows that you really can't hang with the big boys. And they've struggled against weaker opponents, right? Like Arkansas State, like Fresno State. They have been close games. And Michigan, I mean, offensively, it wasn't the best performance, right? They start Alex Orji at quarterback. And if you watched his performance, I mean, you're going to see that Michigan cannot throw the ball. Unfortunately, this year, I think it's just a fact that Michigan is not going to throw the ball. They don't have a quarterback who can throw the ball at an elite rating. Now, they have been running the ball super well. Donovan Edwards kind of had his one big breakout, like 40-yard touchdown. That was cool. But Khalil Mullings, I mean, he's been stealing the show for the Wolverines backfield. I mean, I think at this point he is the clear-cut running back one for Michigan. And I feel bad for Edwards because he played, a couple of years behind Corum, who was a phenomenal running back, one of the best in the Big Ten, one of the best in America. He goes to the draft, goes to the NFL. Edwards, it's his time to shine. And then Mullings steals the show from him. Edwards, I think, is still a very good running back and is going to be used in that offense. And if Mullings were to ever go down, he would definitely be number one again. I just think the way he's been playing, that he's been outperformed by Mullings. Michigan, they ran the ball well. Pick six by Will Johnson. The defensive touchdown was huge, right? Because without that, USC would have outscored Michigan 24-20, right? I think for USC, it's a tough one, right? On the road, 100,000 people in yellow and blue are chanting, and yelling at you. So it's kind of like, you know what? This wasn't a must win for USC. More so, it was a must win for Michigan. But it's crazy to see Michigan as highly ranked as they are because I still think they're pretty overrated. But you got to give it to the Wolverines. They come up with the win. Again, much needed to keep their season alive, I think. Now down to the Big 12, Utah and Oklahoma State. This game had a lot of meaning as well. I wasn't sure about Utah. I think Wilson, the true freshman, the backup, was in for a second straight game since Cam Rising suffered an injury. Although Cam Rising is great, Utah is still a great team without him. And Wilson, I can't remember his first name, but we're going to address him as Wilson. He did good enough. He had a confident boosting game against Utah State the weekend before. Now they go on the road to Oklahoma State. And honestly, Oklahoma State couldn't get anything going offensively. Bowman was not playing well. Ollie Gordon, I mean, there is nothing he's really been able to do, right? I remember one of my previous podcast, my special guest Cody, he mentioned how teams, they will load 8 guys in the box when they know a run is coming, and there is only so much you can do against that. So I agree on that. However, I think Oklahoma needs to find ways to, maybe trick defenses, right? Or find a lot of running plays where, there might be 2 or 3 or, even 4 wide receivers, right? That are lined up, and, they don't have like these huge formations where, you have a bunch of tight ends or an extra lineman where it's going to be an obvious run, right? You have to try to trick defenses and, make them think you're going to pass, because teams are just going to continue to do this. And Ollie Gordon is going to have a really depressing season, right? I mean, he's been averaging like 3 yards a carry. He has been really disappointing. But regardless, Utah, they pick up a win, 22-19 on the road. Big 10 or Big 12 favorites at this point for sure. Missouri, they host Vanderbilt, and Missouri went to double overtime. Now, Vanderbilt, even though the SEC is so good, I will say this: Vanderbilt is a solid SEC team. I think they'd be a top half team most years if the SEC wasn't so great, but this year there's just so many teams. So it's unfortunate that they're one of the worst teams in the SEC, even though realistically they're still solid. And Vanderbilt, I mean, they take on the double overtime. Missouri at home now. This is your second straight game where it's been within one possession against a team that you should be beating by a lot more. Interesting. We'll see. Brady Cook has not been impressive. He's been solid. He's been, decent. Nothing more than that to me. Miami on the road. They take on South Florida. I had in my pick'em, it's a free pick'em I do with my buddies. I had South Florida like plus 16.5, and Miami shattered that. Miami wins 50-15. I mean, I think at this point, right, Cam Ward's the favorite to win the Heisman. Ashton Jeanty had a great game against Portland State last weekend, but he couldn't get in the end zone. He is still the best running back in college football, I will say right now. But I think with Cam Ward having another impressive performance on the road against South Florida, he is the favorite to win the Heisman. A huge win for Miami. Tennessee at Oklahoma. See, I watched a lot of this game, and it was fun to see the Vols on the road. And I think, they were going to be the favorites in this one. Tennessee's been playing lights out. And Tennessee defensively is really scary. They seem like they're just a fierce, fast, tough defense. And Oklahoma really couldn't get anything going until, kind of late when it was kind of like garbage time, right? Tennessee offensively didn't look, like wasn't at their best. I felt like, they scored early and they did what they had to do to, get the win, right? They won by 10 points. We didn't see them score 51 points against NC State, which I think now that we're seeing NC State, at home let up 51 to Tennessee, on the road to Clemson, they let up 59. I think we're seeing that NC State's defense is really bad, at least at the Power 4 level. But for Tennessee, I mean, it was an impressive win, right? On the road, Oklahoma, you gave them a big welcome to the SEC, and you came off with an on-road win. Oklahoma, I still think, Jackson Arnold had a tough game. I think the backup came in for Oklahoma. They got some things going late, but Tennessee, they were really on autopilot mode. I wouldn't say it was, the most fun game to watch, honestly. But a win is a win, right? It's one of those kind of nit and gritty wins that sometimes you got to play. Colorado against Baylor. This was a fun one. This was another game I was watching. So Colorado at home against Baylor, a bottom tier Big 12 team. Colorado, fighting for respect in the conference, right? They had a really tough season last year. They're 2-1 first conference game. And Baylor played really well for most of the game, right? They were, scoring offensively. They were holding Colorado to, minimal offense, it seemed. And Baylor fumbled the bag. It was incredible to see, like the 50-yard Hail Mary that Colorado was successful sending it to overtime, and then, Colorado goes and scores in overtime, and then a goal line run. And Baylor fumbles it at the goal line. Ball goes out in the end zone, which I think would be a touchback. I'm pretty sure, which basically was game over, right? So Colorado, they win 38-31. My thoughts on that. I think it's interesting that like when I watch the replay of the Hail Mary pass, I just think it's like if you're Baylor, like how do you mess that up? They're going for the end zone. You have guys deep. And then you're playing, basically man coverage, with another defensive back. And I get it's wet outside, but it's like, you hoist, and it wasn't even a great throw, I would say, right? For the Hail Mary, right? Ideally, you kind of want to throw it up and, you leap up and you go and get it, right? Not kind of have to like run and dive for it. And again, not trying to like shit on Shedeur Sanders for that. I'm just saying in general, that's what you want to do. But obviously it worked out for them, right? But if you're Baylor, it's like, how do you mess that up? Defensive back kind of slips, and then the safeties were a second late. I mean, it was like you blew that. And it almost seemed like to me, like, like I don't like to be a conspiracy guy, honestly, but like, like were you guys paid to lose that and like fumble that play? Because I'm just like, how do you like it's coming and you still let it happen? And then in overtime, Colorado goes and scores. That's great. On the goal line, you fumble it. Of course, Travis Hunter with the hit, right? It was a good hit. Is he getting maybe a little more recognition for it than he maybe should? Yeah. Was it a good hit? Like, absolutely. I wouldn't say it's like, oh my goodness. I just think, oh, it's Travis Hunter making a big play. And, it was great for Colorado. But then, you see the fans storm the field. Oh my goodness. I'm at a loss for words, really. I don't really know if that game is worthy of storming the field. You're at home against 2-1 Baylor, a bottom half conference opponent, a team that was kicking your ass for a lot of the game. And yes, like the Hail Mary and you won in overtime, like I get that. But like you storm the field after a one possession win against Baylor, who's 2-2, one of the worst teams in your conference, at home? Like, that's just not, field storming worthy, in my opinion. I think way big overreaction for them, And unfortunately, like, not to shit on Colorado, because they are off to a way better start than they were last year, I would say. They have won against shitty teams. North Dakota State, you beat them by 5. You got to beat them by more. Colorado State, one of the worst, mid to bottom half teams in the Mountain West. And then Baylor, one of the worst teams in the Big 12. And then when they played someone pretty legit, although it was a road game, Nebraska shit on them. So I just think that was a little much, in my opinion, for Colorado. Sticking with the Big 12 now for my last kind of recap of week 4. BYU, a huge home win against Kansas State. The Cougs. And I play with BYU. I feel like I'm a little biased towards them. I play with them in my dynasty for college football. They're my one non-Minnesota team I play with. And I was really happy to see BYU win. Not an easy place to play if you're Kansas State. They really couldn't get much, if at all, really anything going. Maybe the play of the year, that huge, what was that, punt return by, was it Chase Roberts? I want to say it was Chase Roberts who got the punt return. I mean, just a crazy fluke of a play, and it ended up being, a phenomenal touchdown. BYU, they were kind of quietly 3-0 in this one. They're 4-0 against, one of the best teams in the Big 12. This really shakes up the Big 12, right? At first, it was really top-heavy with Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Utah. Now it's like you got BYU in the mix. Iowa State had a big home win this weekend with Oklahoma State and Kansas State losing in the week 5. It's juicy in the Big 12. We've got some interesting things to look at. And then Colorado 3-1. They're kind of like that, maybe like that sixth best team. Unlikely to do much in the to win a conference or even make the conference championship, but in the conversation now, it's good stuff. Um, so yeah, that's my kind of my recap for week 4. We got the week 5 now AP poll. We're gonna kind of go by just one by one quickly. Texas, they're 4-0. They remain at number 1. Georgia, they had a bye, so they're at 2. That's fine. Ohio State, they're at 3. They had a nice win against Marshall at home, 49-14. I mean, it was a little sloppy by Ohio State. I wouldn't say it was their most impressive win. Probably their quote unquote worst win of the season. Alabama stays at 4. They were on bye. Tennessee moves up to number 5, which I totally agree with. I could even see them being at 4, just having now 2 road victories against ranked teams, right? Because you got to respect it. Week 2, they had a road victory against NC State. Week 4 at Oklahoma. Really great start for the Tennessee Volunteers. Ole Miss moves down to 6. I mean, they had a home win against Georgia Southern. Wasn't, by all means, wasn't the best win ever, but win is a win. Ole Miss is still going to be super scary to go up against offensively. I don't think anyone wants to play Ole Miss, really. Miami moves up to 7, which I totally agree with. A nice road win at South Florida. Oregon to 8. They were on bye. I think they actually moved up 1, which is fine. Penn State, they shut out Kent State like 56-0. I mean, unfortunately, maybe the worst team in the FBS. So Penn State up to 9. Utah cracks the top 10 with a road victory at Oklahoma State. I totally agree with Utah right now is the front runner in the Big 12. They've looked really good, and especially once Cam Rising comes back, they're going to be better. Missouri falls 4 spots to number 11, and I totally get it. Missouri is the worst 4-0 team in the country, I think. I mean, there's probably worse 4-0 teams, at least out of like the big boy, the front top end teams in the country. They're the worst 4-0 team, I should say. I'm sure there's other. I mean, like BYU's 4-0, Illinois 4-0. My bad. But Missouri number 11. I mean, I can't agree with it more. Right? You play Boston College, who's a very good team at home, and you only win by 6. You play Vanderbilt, who's worse than Boston College, and they take you to to overtime. Missouri, something's got to give, right? They looked great weeks 1 and 2. Weeks 3 and 4, they've looked questionable. And come conference play, their schedule is not going to get any easier. They're a team, right, that I think is kind of on the hot seat because at first it was like, okay, are they going to sneak in, to the college football playoffs? But now that Tennessee's emerging, Bama, Georgia, Texas are still there. Ole Miss, might be that team, right, that they've been doing well enough where they might sneak in as, that 5th SEC team. And I mean, we can talk about this later, but I'm not sure if the SEC brings more than 5 teams to the college football playoffs. And I can break that down maybe, during another episode when we have more time. But Missouri at 11, Michigan moves up to 12. I mean, that just seems so high for the Wolverines, but I get it. A home win against USC, that's great. But definitely the most overrated team for sure. USC only moves down 2. They're at number 13. It's a little high, but also it's like, what do you expect, right? An on-road loss by 3 points to Michigan. It is what it is. LSU up to 14. They have moved up 2. They have looked really good. They had a nice home win against UCLA last weekend. Louisville up to 15. They're 3-0. They've got a big battle this weekend against Notre Dame. And speaking of Notre Dame, they're right behind them at 16. They had a nice win against Miami, Ohio. Notre Dame has definitely looked a lot better since their home loss to NIU. Clemson moves up to 17. They're 2-1. An ass-whooping performance against NC State. And although they let up a lot of, offense kind of the second half of the game, they were still on the gas, and they scored 59 points. And offensively, right, Clemson looks to be great again. Iowa State moves up to 18. They had a big win against Arkansas State. Iowa State, I mean, that's the second best team in the Big 12 right now, technically, right? Because Kansas State, Oklahoma State moves back. Iowa State, they're impressive. We'll see. They're making the Big 12 interesting. Illinois moves up to 19. I mean, they had a nice win against Nebraska on the road. That was really impressive for them. They're a top 20 team. And then we got Oklahoma State. Home loss to Utah. I'm not sure if they really deserve to be this high. That seems a little high for me, but that's okay. Oklahoma to 21. Then lose 6 at home to Tennessee. Tough loss for them, but I'd say that's rightfully so. BYU, one of the 2 non-ranked teams that are new this week. I mean, yeah, a nice ass-whooping performance against Kansas State. Jake Radslav, a very good quarterback. I would say one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the Big 12. They've been performing well. Kansas State to 23. I get it. You got to rank them right behind BYU. I still think Kansas State, I think they're going to redeem themselves this weekend, in my opinion. Texas A&M moves up to 1 just to 24. And then Boise State, the one other newly ranked team for this weekend, they had a big win against Portland State. Now let's go into my Week 5 preview. This is kind of going to be – we've already been 30 minutes in, and we're just getting started, it feels. Week 5 preview. Back to Minnesota. St. Thomas is on a bye. Much needed. They take on, I want to say, Stetson to start and open up Pioneer League play. Unfortunately, they have had a rough non-conference slate so far. 1-3 heading into conference play. The Gophers on the road, number 12, Michigan. And Michigan's now had 5 home games in a row. That is so crazy. Over a month of home games. Go Wolverines, I guess. Michigan's only like a -10 in this game. I'm sorry, but you got to hammer the -10 Michigan. I don't see Minnesota really putting up much of a fight here on the road. Minnesota, I mean, Michigan's offense is not elite by any means, but they have been running the ball successfully. If Minnesota could stop the run, I think if you're Minnesota, force Michigan to pass the ball. Because regardless if you have Alex Orji or Davis Warren in at quarterback, I don't know who they're going with. I would imagine they're going with Orji again just because he, picked up a win. Force him to throw the ball. I think he only had, I want to say, did he only have like 30 or 40 yards passing against USC? And that was the biggest issue that I saw with the USC. They did not force Michigan to pass the ball. You got to do what teams are doing against Ollie Gordon and Oklahoma State, right? Load 8 guys in the box, 7 or 8 guys in the box, right? Because then it's like, okay, Michigan's not going to be able to really run the ball against, if you got 8 guys, going against Mullings or Edwards. That's what Minnesota needs to do. Force Michigan to throw the ball. Because if you do that, they're not going to be successful. And if they do, if Michigan, slings the ball and is really successful this weekend, then so be it, right? Then it's like, well, maybe it just wasn't meant to be. If you force Michigan to pass the ball, you're going to have a chance. Because Alex Orji or Davis Warren, they're not going to really get wins. They have looked pretty depressing. I kind of question if I could do better. I wouldn't. But Michigan, I got to favorite them. I think they're going to go to 4-1. Virginia Tech tonight. Virginia Tech, they take on number 7, Miami. Down to Florida. Virginia Tech, I think it's crazy. They were going to be a team that was a fringe top 25, and they've had a couple tough losses. A road loss to Vanderbilt, which wasn't great to start the season. Miami, they're -17.5 in this game, and they have been beating that spread. So part of me feels like you got to take -17 Miami in this one. Oklahoma State, Kansas State. This is huge, right? Now we kind of get into these games, which I love discussing, these conference games that really start to matter. Because even though we're only in week 5 and we still have a few months to go before the college football playoffs, these games matter so much because of conference championships. And for teams to get that first round bye, that is going to be crucial come playoff time, right? Because now it's like, okay, you're not playing 2 games. It's like, well, you might be playing 3 to 4 games, right? Big difference there. Um, both teams suffered a loss. Oklahoma State at home to Utah, Kansas State on the road to BYU. Both teams are still alive in the Big 12, absolutely. But with BYU and Iowa State emerging, and then now Colorado's in the conversation, and then Utah, they're the king of the hill right now. If you have a second loss, right? Like if you're Oklahoma State and if you lose this one, or if you're Kansas State and you lose this one, two conference losses against good teams is not going to look great. And basically, for example, if you're Oklahoma State and you lose this game, it pretty much makes you, well, okay, now you have two conference losses. You're pretty much going to have to win out from here and then hope teams like an Iowa State, like a BYU, like a Utah, like a Kansas State, you got to hope that, they have another loss or two throughout the season. Only two teams make the college football or the conference championship, right? So it's slim pickings from there. I got to go Kansas State on this one. I think they're -5. I like their offense, the way they've been playing. But also, it's tough to really go against, Ollie Gordon, Alan Bowman, and the Cowboys' offense as well. I just think they really have had really no counter for teams' defenses stopping Ollie Gordon, right? He hasn't been able to do something really much at all weeks 2 through 4. Give me Kansas State in this one. Number 22, BYU at Baylor. Baylor's favored in this one, which I get, BYU, I mean, they're decent, and they're, again, a decent 3-0 team. But, this is a conference team on the road. I would take BYU in this one. This should be a close one, but we'll see if they're the real deal. You know what? You beat a great team at home. Let's see if you can go on the road and beat another conference opponent. If they can, I think BYU is a top 20 team. Absolutely. Here's a juicy one. Louisville at Notre Dame, 15-16. Louisville, 3-0. I think right behind Michigan, they're the most overrated team in college football. Notre Dame at 3-1. They've redeemed themselves so far. And you know what? This is a big win for Notre Dame. You already have a horrible loss to NIU. If you lose this one to to Louisville, I didn't say Louisiana, but in my head I was about to say Louisiana. That's why I caught myself. To Louisville, if you lose this one, that's 2 home losses for the Fighting Irish. And then it's like, well, if, you're not even going to get the first round bye because, you're an independent. So if you want to get in at large, I mean, even if they were to go 10-2, there's going to be so many other SEC and, a handful of other Big 10 or Big 12 or ACC opponents that are going to be 10-2 that don't have that tough loss like you did against NIU at home. They're going to get in. This is a must-win game for Notre Dame, in my opinion. Absolutely. And if they can win, and I think they're going to be the favorites in this game. I do have Notre Dame winning this game, by the way. At home, I like their chances. They have looked a lot better since NIU. I think that was a humbling experience for them, but the way they've been playing, I think you got to take the Irish in this one. Wisconsin at USC. This one just kind of caught my eye, thinking how the Badgers are going to Los Angeles to play a game against USC. I think USC bounces back and the Trojans take a big win. Plus, Wisconsin without Tyler Van Dyke, right? I don't think he's healthy. They didn't look great against Bama. USC is definitely not as good as Bama by any means, but on the road in a new environment for Wisconsin, right? None of these guys have played down there. I don't like their chances. USC, I think, should pick up their first conference win of the season. Arkansas, Texas A&M. This game does not have much meaning. Arkansas is a good SEC team, and Texas A&M, although they're number 24 in the country, a team that's probably not going to make the playoffs. They're going to make a good bowl game, I'm sure, but not making the playoffs, right? But Arkansas, I was telling you guys to begin the year, they're going to, shatter some hearts. And I think they're going to shatter, the little hope that Texas A&M has to making the college football playoffs. I think they're going to be an upset watch. That should be a fun one. Colorado at UCF. Weird calling this a Big 12 game. UCF, watch out for UCF. They run the ball. They are 3-0. They are averaging like damn near 400 rushing yards a game. And Colorado, I mean, I think we can all agree, Colorado has some stars, but defensively, they are not good. 26 to NDSU, 28 to Nebraska. Okay, 9 to Colorado State. Okay, good performance. 31 to Baylor. And it was almost going to be 38, right? And now you're on the road, probably against the second best team you've had to play all year. I don't see them doing very well. This should be a fun one, though. It'll be kind of cool to see Colorado UCF. UCF's pretty decent, I would say. Definitely a very solid mid-tier team in the Big 12. I kind of forget about them sometimes. That should be fun. UNC against Duke, a huge ACC rivalry there. UNC had a really tough loss against James Madison, 70-50 last weekend. Crazy. I hope you guys took the over on that one. You would have won big money in that game. Duke is quietly 4-0. I think UNC without their starting quarterback on the road isn't going to win. But Duke, I mean, if they go 5-0, I don't think you rank them. But out of respect, you got to give them votes, right? Now let's get to the meat and potatoes this weekend. Georgia, Bama. I'm sorry for the ear people if you had your headphones or if that was loud. But number 2, Georgia at number 4, Alabama. College game day is going to be here. This is the game of the weekend, game of the year thus far. I mean, holy shit, there's so much behind this game. I mean, rivals, 2 phenomenal rosters, dynasties, really, right? 3-0 Georgia, 3-0 Bama, both coming off bye. I mean, this is incredible. This is awesome. Oh gosh. So I saw something saying how Alabama was like 100 and plus, well over 100 games, where at home they were the favorite to win. And this weekend, Georgia's -2, which I think is a little absurd, but I also get it. This game has so much damn meaning. Oh my goodness, right? Because both of these teams are going to compete for the SEC championship. Both of these teams want that first round bye. Texas is kind of in that mix. Tennessee's in that mix. Ole Miss is in that mix. But you have number 2 and number 3 in the SEC going at it right now, right? I mean, here's how I look at it. If Georgia wins, this is a phenomenal victory for their program. They're going to be number 1 in the country because Texas has not played anyone good, and they will regain number 1 in the country. If Bama wins, I don't know if you put them at number 1, but you probably put them at number 2, right? Probably over Ohio State because Ohio State plays Michigan State, and, they should win that game, but it's not going to be, by any means super impressive. I don't know if you put them over Texas. But Alabama will for sure rise to number 2, maybe number 1. But Georgia, if they win, number 1 in the country, and it's not even close to me. Here's how I look at it. If Georgia wins, they are going to be the favorite to make the SEC championship. Not to win it, but to make it. Because if you put that on your resume, and it's a step closer to making the SEC championship for them, right? And they still have a tough schedule. They still got to go to Texas. They still got, I want to say, Ole Miss. They've got some tough opponents coming. But if they can start the battle at Tuscaloosa and win, that's huge. Whoever wins this, here's how I look at it too, just for both teams. Whoever wins, it basically allows them a little bit more wiggle room because the SEC is so good. It's going to be really difficult, I think, for any of these teams to go undefeated in SEC play. It's possible. And, Bama's good enough to do it. Georgia's good enough to do it. Tennessee's good enough to do it. Texas is good enough to do it. But it's going to be really difficult. But if you are really looking for that first round bye, that SEC championship, or at least, even if you make the SEC championship and lose, I mean, you're an automatic bid. You're probably going to be, the fifth or sixth seed, right? Probably the 5th seed, honestly. But if you're Georgia and you lose, whoever loses, it's tough because basically now it's like, okay, if Georgia loses, they're probably still going to be in the top 10. If Bama loses, they'll probably still be in the top 10 because you got to put respect to their name. But it's going to be difficult because the SEC is so front heavy, and now basically you have to hope for a loss, right? From Tennessee, from Ole Miss, maybe from Texas. But this is what makes this game so great and so valuable. It comes down to heart. Although Georgia's roster, I'd say, is better than Alabama, it comes down to heart. But it's not going to be easy for Georgia. It's going to be an uphill battle. On the road, Bama fans are going to be chanting at you, yelling in your face. And after the, week 3 performance at Kentucky, if you're Georgia, unfortunately, that's not going to really boost your confidence there, right? I'm stoked for this game. It's a 6:30 kickoff. You'll be counting my ass. I'll be watching that game, absolutely. And I feel bad because number 19 Illinois is at number 9 Penn State. I'm like, oh, that's actually a pretty big Big Ten game on NBC. 6:30 kickoff. No one's watching that unless if you're a big Illinois or Penn State fan, or if you're just a big Big Ten fan, maybe. But if you're a true college football fan, you're watching Georgia Bama. It's a monumental game. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm flabbergasted for this one. My last game, number 10, Utah hosts unranked. Sorry, not ranked, Arizona. They're 2-1. Utah's 4-0. I still got to look into Cam Rising's injury. I'd hope he'll be playing, but I'm not sure. But I'm excited for this one. Arizona, I think, they were a team that, suffered a tough loss to Kansas State. It's not getting any easier for them, but if they can win against Utah, this will be awesome for them. But Utah, I think they have the pretty clear-cut favorite. They're at home. They're much more well-rounded than Arizona. Arizona really is just good at passing the ball, and if they could stop that, then they're fine, right? We haven't really seen much from Arizona anywhere else. I think Utah's going to advance to 5-0. Penn State, I think, will beat Illinois. They should. They're at home. And if they can, that'll be, they're probably their best win of the season. Georgia, Bama, I never really, by the way, mentioned who I think is going to win. I think Bama's going to win. I would take Bama +2. At home, I just don't see Georgia going there. But if they can, that would be huge for Georgia. And if Bama loses this one, I think it's going to be really difficult for them to win and maybe make the SEC championship. They're still good enough, and they probably will make the college football playoffs at large. But just with how good the SEC is right now, if they suffer a home loss to Georgia, even though it's Georgia number 2 in the country, I just think it's going to be really difficult for them to bounce back and make the SEC championship with how good Tennessee and Texas are playing as well. That's kind of my final thoughts for week 5 for the preview. Games are set tomorrow. Plenty of college football. We've got some tonight. By the way, I love that they've been doing a lot more Friday night games for college football. Tonight we got Virginia Tech at Miami, a solid ACC game. I'll be watching that for sure. Anyway, that's going to do it. Thanks for watching and listening to the Inside Scoop podcast. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you guys later.